Thank you, Don.
Or say if you said Don or John,
Yeah,
and then he got nudged over there, and she's like John, so.
It got done. We're good. We're good. All right, we started out on 24, this description of the judgment, and number 2, the cause of the judgment. And the cause of the judgment was our abuse of the creation, the pollution. Go ahead. So the cause of the judgment was pollution, the way we have abused the creation, take advantage of it, our greed. It all had to be purified. And so that brings us to number 3, the results of the judgment. All right, 6 through 13. Before we do that, the earth is defiled by its people, and they have disobeyed the laws, violated the statutes, and broken the everlasting covenant. What was the everlasting covenant? Part of number 2, question 2. I'm sorry, you need one. What was the everlasting covenant? Wasn't it? You guys here listening?
she wasn't.
What did God tell Adam and Eve? What was it?
Which time?
What's God's first commandment?
To take care of the land.
Yeah, take care of the earth. Their only job was to tend the garden. And we messed that up completely. So, the everlasting covenant, if they'd have just done what God said and refrained from doing one thing, we'd be living in a garden right now, a big, beautiful garden. And everybody'd be safe.
No, we wouldn't, because I would have messed it up if they didn't.
Okay, 6 through 13. 6 through 13. We're in chapter 20.
Therefore a curse consumed the earth. Its people must bear their guilt. Therefore earth's inhabitants are burned up, and very few are left. The new wine dies up, and the vineyard withers. All the merrymakers groan. The joyful timbrels are stilled. The noise of the revelers has stopped. The joyful harps is silent. No longer do they drink wine with a song. The beer is bitter to its drinkers. The ruined city lies desolate. The entrance to every house is barred. In the streets they cry out for wine. All joy turns to gloom. All joyful sounds are banished from the earth. 13, you said? 13.
13.
The city is left in ruin. Its gate is battered to pieces. So will it be on the earth and among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, or as when gleaners are left after the grape harvest.
Okay. So it starts out. Therefore a curse consumes the earth. What's a curse? Read it. What's the rest of the verse? Therefore a curse consumes the earth. What's the rest of the verse?
Earth's inhabitants are burned up, and very few are left.
So what's a curse?
Earth's inhabitants are burned
Death?
Huh?
Death?
Death, but what caused it?
Guilt.
Huh?
Guilt.
Who's guilt?
The inhabitants.
We're the curse. Nobody wants to admit it. No, Nobody wants to say, me, I did it. But the bottom line is, we brought sin into this thing through our disobedience, through our, to our neglect, through our greed. Everything is listed prior. We caused it. We caused it because we didn't do one thing that we were asked to do. Tend the garden. And that's all we had to do. And don't eat of that one tree. Tend to the garden and don't eat of that one tree. And the whole mess that the earth is in today is a sin problem. I don't know if you watch the news or not or look at anything, but the bottom line is they've got all these reasons for why all these murders and all these shootings and all this stuff is happening, and they want to blame it on this, that, or the other. The bottom line is sin causes it. If we would just stop sinning, nobody'd be murdered again. Nobody'd ever get murdered again. Nobody'd ever get robbed again. The guy that defended himself in the bodega in New York last week, he ended up in jail. And had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get out of jail. It was on video. He took the abuse for like 5 minutes. Anybody see the video? He took the abuse for like 5 minutes. This guy was bouncing him off the walls. And finally he grabbed a knife off the counter and he stabbed the guy. They put him in jail. There's not even any justice. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned up and very few are left. Okay. Now, remember, we're talking about the last 45 days of human history. We're talking about the bowls of wrath. And the only people left here are the ones that just rejected Jesus Christ right to the bitter end. Actually, through those final 7 years, there's going to be a huge revival. But there's going to be those holdouts. There's going to be those people who will not admit their guilt, who will not admit it. I was preaching a sermon one time, about 30 years ago, in a church in French Lick. And we were in Romans, and in Romans it says, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Okay. How many of you disagree with it? I mean, how many of you are perfect? How many of you can say, not me? A guy actually stood up in that church and said, I haven't. Just did. I said, Jim, you told me that the only book that was appropriate for this church was the Bible. Yeah? I said, let me read it to you again. I said, and all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. He said, I haven't. I said, okay, well, we're going to get on with this, and I'll need to talk to you after church. Of course, he hit the door and left. His wife got him out of there. But the bottom line is, he stood up in church and said, I haven't ever sinned. I haven't ever sinned. It's interesting that we are born knowing how to cry, but we have to be taught how to smile. Isn't that true?
I don't know, he was smiling.
Yeah, and you coached him into it too, didn't you? You tickled him and played with him. But our first response to this earth is screaming and crying. The new wine dries up. Have you ever noticed how hot the summers are getting? How much hotter they're... You know, every year it gets a little bit worse, a little bit worse. The gaiety of the tabourines, the joy of the heart, the joy of living in some places is it's gone. People are afraid to go out at night, they're afraid to go out in the day anymore. So that's how it's gonna be. Now, 14 through 16, the response of the righteous. Only three, somebody read it.
They raise their voices, they shout for joy. From the west they acclaim the Lord's majesty. Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord. Exalt the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, in the islands of the sea. For the ends of the earth we hear singing, glory to the righteous one. But I said, I waste away, woe to me. The treacherous betray with treachery, the treacherous betray.
Okay. 16 split in half there. We'll pick up the last half after we look at this. Now, while all this is going on, while the vineyards are being burned up by the famines and by the droughts, while mankind is making their last desperate stand to defend their sinfulness, the righteous are singing song. That seem appropriate? All this misery and the righteous are singing song. Okay, what?
Because we're singing God's glory, He's protecting us.
We're seeing God's glory, we're seeing His protection. That's true, I agree. What else is going on?
Hopefully others will see what our glory, what good is coming to us, and they will turn from their wicked ways and
Okay,
come.
that's true, that's all true. And the first word that came to my mind when I considered it, the question was justice. Finally, justice is coming to the earth. Was there justice the other day when that guy defended himself and ended up in jail? Was that justice? I mean, I've often considered what I would do if somebody broke into my house, threatened my wife and myself, and I had to shoot him. Would I call the sheriff or not?
Afterwards.
Huh?
Afterwards. Afterwards.
Yeah, but, I mean, this guy had a camera showing the whole thing, and he's in jail.
I've got a backhoe.
I got a backhoe.
That's New York, and it's not Illinois.
I don't know.
Nobody knows there.
So that's why I will never go to New York ever again. There's certain places where it's evil. You can just feel the evil in the air. You can just feel, when you step one foot. I mean, you don't even have to watch the news. If you go there, you can just feel how dread and hate and everything in it.
Yeah. There are recluses. There are places where we can go and feel protected and feel in fellowship with righteousness and goodness. But man, the way things are going in the world today, I'm gonna be tempted to just throw him in the back of his pickup truck, taking him to Crawford County somewhere, and leave the truck down there and let somebody else find him. Because you can't trust justice anymore. We're not living in the same world I grew up in. The meanest guy in town in Newcomerstown, Ohio, would not do two things. I don't care how nasty he was. There was two things that he would not do. He would not touch a church, and he would not touch a kid. And if he did, he didn't last long in jail. Now we're lowering the age of consent to 14, and pedophiles are pushing for legislation to protect their sexual preference. Pedophiles? If God lets America go much farther, He's going to have to apologize to Sodom. That's my opinion.
And
believe
it's
it.
not a matter of trusting justice, it's a matter of trusting God. And, you know, we do what God, you know, what's right in God's eyes, and no matter what happens, even if we, you know, even if we do go to jail, maybe that's a chance to talk to somebody else to get them to change too. So, you know, you gotta look at it, you know, as, all right, you know, justice is not doing it. Okay, God, I'm putting I'm putting my life in your hands. You show me what you want me to do. And, you know, I always tell my kid, life sucks, deal with it. So, you know, you just deal with what it's done and trust God's gonna get you through it.
I agree. We live in a coinciding kingdom, coexisting kingdom. There's Satan's kingdom, and that's a world, and there's God's kingdom, and that's where the believers live. And we are, to some extent, protected in that kingdom. But have we really done anything to maintain the quality of living we had in the 50s? Have we taken a stand? Have we stood up to the politicians who lied to us and said they were going to go to Washington and do something, and then did something else? And how did we send those people back there and give them 50-year careers?
We've all been too busy worried about the latest in Hollywood, the latest in what the score is on the game, and people were back in the 20s. The politics was the thing. I mean, everybody followed it, everybody read about it, everybody paid attention to it. We just got out of the war, and they were concerned. And even during the roaring 20s, when all everybody wanted to do was just go to the speakeasy and learn Charleston and keep out of Capone's way, you know, even then, the majority of the population was more interested in the politics and the running of the country. You know, why things were going on that didn't suit them. They paid attention. And since then, things have progressed to, hey, it's more leisure, it's more relaxed. Hey, who wants to pay attention to all this garbage and all you've got? Let's go have a good time. Everybody wants to go out and have a good time. I want to go out and have a good time. But people have forgot that with great freedom comes even greater responsibility, and that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. You got to dig in and roll up your sleeves and work at it. And nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why the country's in the shape it's in. Because we've all gotten lazy and irresponsible. Every daggone one of us.
I totally agree. It all started in the 60s. Now, most of you guys weren't around here in the 60s, were you? How many of you were born before 70? Okay, I'm the only guy. And why Steve's not down there teaching this class, and I'm up there teaching it, I don't know. But that's the way it worked out, and it's right. We're both in the same place where we're supposed to be. But the bottom line is, I have a perspective you don't have. I have seen the 50s. I have slept out in my yard. I've left my bike on the front yard, and Dad got mad because it got wet, but nobody would steal it. He was upset because I didn't take care of my bike. He wasn't upset because somebody was going to steal my bike, because nobody stole a kid's bike back then. And kids were safe. Nobody would abuse a kid. They were afraid of what was going to happen to them if they did, because there was justice. And we've been distracted. Probably one of the biggest hypocrisies in the church is Super Bowl Sunday. They literally shut down churches all across this nation on Super Bowl Sunday so that you could start watching the Super Bowl at 9 o'clock in the morning. Have all these pregame shows, and the whole world's doing it. One of Hitler's biggest distractions was sports. He told his people, he said, if we can distract them and give them, make sure they have food and make sure they are entertained by sports, they'll let us do anything we want to do. And how'd that turn out? And then before the people realized what was going on, it was too late. The armies were in charge, and the politicians were absolutely worthless. They either complied or they disappeared. Okay, 17 through 23 is the coming judgment, and we've kind of beat that to death through the last 20 chapters. So somebody read it right quick, and we'll go to 25.
Terror, traps, and snares will be your lot, you people of the earth. Those who flee in terror will fall into a trap, and those who escape the trap will be caught in a snare. Destruction falls like rain from the heavens, the foundations of the earth shake. The earth is broken up, it has utterly collapsed, it is violently shaken. The earth staggers like a drum, it trembles like a tent in a storm, it falls and will not rise again, for the guilt of its rebellion is very heavy. In that day the Lord will punish the gods in the heavens and the crowned rulers of the nations on earth. They will be rounded up and put in prison. They will be shut up in prison and will finally be punished. Then the glory of the moon will wane and the brightness of the sun will fade. For the Lord of heaven's armies will rule on Mount Zion. He will rule in great glory in Jerusalem in the sight of all leaders of his people.
Okay, basically what's going on there. God is cleansing the earth, and he's going to put it back the way it was. We could go to several different places in the Old Testament, a couple in the New, and we're going to do it on this one. God is going to, we're going to end up right back in the Garden of Eden, the way it should have been in the beginning. There's not going to be any big cities, there's not going to be any skyscrapers, there's not going to be any hunger, there's not going to be anybody suffering, nobody dying. God is going to heal the nations. And when we get to 25 gives us God's 7-step plan for dealing with the situation. Verse number 1, God's plan to establish a personal relationship with his children, to be my God, and to every individual believer. You may read verse number 1.
Oh Lord, you are my God, I will exalt you, I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things, your counsels uphold our faithfulness and truth.
Okay. After Jesus Christ returns, sets up his 1,000-year reign, the earth is going to be right back the way it was. There's going to be, we're going to go back to the original creation. Everything God does in the bowls of wrath are to reestablish justice and to purify the earth. And we will be standing with him on a cloud when that happens. In 1 Corinthians, it tells us at the 7th trump, Jesus Christ will return. And we will rise to be with him in the clouds. And if you go to I think it's in John, one of the epistles of John, it says the church will not suffer to experience the wrath of God. If you look at Revelation, you've got the seals, you've got the trumpets. When the 7th trumpet starts to blow, God says, hold it. We have something left to do. And it doesn't tell us what, but if you go to Corinthians, it says that trumpet's going to blow, and we're going to rise to be with him on a cloud. It's going to be 3.5 years for the seals, 3.5 years for the trumpets, and then 45 days, according to Daniel, for the bolts of wrath. And we will stand with Christ on a cloud for 45 days and watch him return the earth back to its original state. And then we will descend with him along with the city of Jerusalem, and we will rule with him for 1,000 years. And what's the purpose of that? Well, verse 1 tells us. It said, that whole thing comes about so that we can have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. We have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ now, don't we?
We're not sitting next to it.
But he's in heaven. How can I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ if he's in heaven?
Spirit?
The Spirit. Remember, he sent the Spirit back to get me through the next 2,000 years that we're going to have. And he also told his disciples, I will never leave you, I will be with you always. But now it's in spirit. When Jesus Christ returns and sets up that 1,000-year reign, we will not have to go through the Spirit to be in his presence any longer. He will be sitting on the throne, and we will be worshiping him and praising him and giving him glory. Look at what it says here. O Lord, you are my God. Well, is that the case today?
Depends on who you ask.
Huh?
Depends on who you're talking
Depends
to.
on who you ask. Okay, but me. Is the Lord my God, period? No, we got the IRS. And we've got the state government who tried to get me to pay my taxes twice this year. And they lost. And we've got the federal government. We have the neighbors next door. And sometimes you get along with them and sometimes you don't. And you have to do a whole bunch of things in this world today to survive, huh?
I just told you
I was gonna say, all her neighbors are relatives, so you know, she's got relatives all over.
Not cake.
Okay, well, don't make it so hard on them, they don't want to come. But, you know, in that day, there will be one source of government, and that will be Jesus Christ, and he will be the Lord of the earth. We won't have to get a passport to go to Germany. You go anywhere you want. We won't have to depend on Medicare to heal our cancer. There won't be any Medicare, and there won't be any cancer. We will have one authority over us, and we will not be trying to sort out and defend ourselves on 40 different levels, because that's where we are right now, isn't it? The Lord is my God, but I still have to pay my taxes, or the IRS is going to take my house. You know, right now I have to give God what is God's. I have to give Caesar what is Caesar's. When this happens, I just have to worry about giving God what is God. I'm not gonna have to deal with any of the rest of it. And then there will be a true believer-God relationship. And it won't be muddied by everything else that's going on around me. There will be gun control in those 1,000 years. We won't need one. So, the bottom line is that personal relationship is going to fix everything. And sin is not going to be reigning supreme. Okay. Why will that be?
Won't be any sin.
What happens at the end of the last bowl wrap?
Satan's thrown in the pit.
And he's the source of all sin. No Satan, no sin. We're not tempted by God. We're tempted by Satan. And if he's not around, there won't be a problem. Now, what happens at the end of the 1,000 years?
He's loosed.
Hmm?
He's loosed for a short time.
They let Satan loose for a short season. What's a season? 3 months? There are 4 seasons, 12 months. 12 divided by 4. All right, so this is going to be a short season. So instead of 3 months, it's going to be like 2 months. And what happens? There's this huge rebellion, and sin comes back into the earth. Now, why would God do that? We'll talk about that when we get into it. Okay. There's a reason. But why would God do that? Because some things need to be sorted out. There are some people who never had a chance to choose God for their salvation. And the Bible says, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and ye shall be saved. Well, there are people who never had a choice. What about the aborted babies? What about the miscarried babies? What about the people who never heard the truth about Jesus Christ and were never given a choice to choose Him or the world? Is it fair for them to spend eternity in hell? Well, after you live 1,000 years with Jesus Christ and everything is at peace and nobody dies and everybody's healthy and there's no sickness and there's no pain and the lion lays down with the lamb, Satan is going to be turned loose for a couple months. There's going to be this huge rebellion against the God that has sat on the throne for 1,000 years and provided people with everything. Who's going to be the rebellious? The people who have not had a choice. Now, the people who return with Jesus Christ, those people are, most of them will be people who have chosen. But the bottom line is, some of them were not allowed to make a choice. What about the men who were retarded that couldn't understand? Well, their minds will be clear for this 1,000 years, and at the end of that 1,000 years, they'll be able to choose Satan, who was released for a couple months, or the God that had provided for them for 1,000 years. So there won't be a big rebellion, right? There won't.
No, there will.
There will. Matter of fact, it says that the army will be as the sands on the seashore. How could you live with God for 1,000 years, have everything provided for you, know His love personally, face to face, and rebel against Him in the end?
Because people are stupid, that's why.
You're right, buddy. People are. Well, that about sums it up. We'll start with number 2 next week.